Welcome to the Ignition News. We love to have you here, but remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Click that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment below. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's get busy with the truth. Good morning and welcome to the Ignition News. Today is Sunday, April 19th, and we have just one story today, which is the upcoming food crisis. The Financial Times published a piece this weekend that should really be the lead on every front page news in the country, but of course it's not. It's buried in the weekend essay section, past a paywall, past all the comments, and past the photographs of container ships on fire. The headline is simple: the coming global food crisis. 45 million people. 45 million people. That is the United Nations World Food Program estimate for how many additional human beings will be pushed into acute hunger because of the war in Iran. 2/3 of them live in Africa: Sudan, Somalia, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Kenya, Mozambique. Countries that had nothing to do with this war, that did not ask for it, and that did not get a vote in whether or not Operation Epic Fury went forward. Those people are going to starve anyway, and many of them are going to die. This is the Ignition News. Today is just one story, so stay with me. Let's talk about what the Green Revolution. Most people don't actually know this, so here it is in just really plain language. The modern food system does not run on sunshine. It runs on natural gas. Starting in the 1950s, a wave of industrial agriculture reshaped farming across Asia, Latin America, and parts of Africa. New crop varieties, big machines, pumped irrigation, and above all else, synthetic fertilizer. Ammonia, urea, ammonium nitrate, nitrogen pulled out of the air in factories that burn enormous amounts of fossil fuel energy. Of course, the promise was higher yields, more food per acre, population growth the planet could absorb, and for a while the promise was good. They were good on their word. India more than doubled wheat production between the mid-60s and the early 70s. In many places, famine was actually pushed back. But the bill, of course, was deferred. The check would come later. The price of the Green Revolution was that every loaf of bread, every bowl of rice, every tortilla on the planet became tied to the price of methane. Break the gas supply, and you break the food supply. That is the system that we built. Here's the part that the Pentagon briefings leave out. When Americans hear Gulf states, they think oil. They think of Saudi Arabia pumping crude. They think Qatar shipping gas. They do not think bread. And you should start thinking about bread. Saudi Arabia is the second largest ammonia exporter on the planet. Oman is the sixth. Together with Qatar, the Gulf supplies more than 3/4 of India's ammonia imports, 30% of Morocco's imports, 30% of global ammonia exports, 30% originate in the Middle East. Ammonia is the starting point for every mineral nitrogen fertilizer in the world. 70% of global ammonia production goes into fertilizer. If you eat something that grew in dirt, there is a good chance the nitrogen that fed that plant came out of a Gulf factory. But it doesn't stop at ammonia. Half of the world's seaborne sulfur passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Sulfur makes sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid turns phosphate rock into phosphate fertilizer. Morocco, which runs the biggest phosphate industry on Earth, gets 3/4 of its sulfur from the Gulf. Then there's urea, the most widely used nitrogen fertilizer on the planet. Gulf countries account for 35% of global trade. Saudi Arabia was the largest urea exporter in the world in 2024. Oman was third. And Egypt, the second largest urea exporter, has a company called Fertiglobe at the center of its production capacity. Fertiglobe is controlled by ADNOC, which is the state oil company of the United Arab Emirates. So when you say Egyptian urea, what you are really saying is Emirati urea with an Egyptian address. Then there's the logistics. Jebel Ali in Dubai is the world's largest human-made harbor. It is ninth globally in container throughput. It connects more than 150 ports bi-weekly service. Wheat flour bound for Somalia moves through this port. Aid to Sudan moves through there as well. The UN Food Program stages there. The International Humanitarian City, which is the world's largest disaster relief logistics hub, is literally right next door. Jebel Ali is also, and this matters, the United States Navy's busiest port of call outside of the United States. Every piece of infrastructure I just named, every single port, every ammonia terminal, every sulfur corridor, every fertilizer plant, every grain silo, every humanitarian staging area, all of this sits inside the blast radius of the war that the United States and Israel are waging on Iran. We are 7 weeks into this. The World Bank published its March price index this month, and here's what's on the ledger. Energy prices are up 41.6% in a single month. European natural gas is up 59.4%. Brent crude, 45.8%. Food prices are up just 2.7%, but fertilizer prices are up 26.2%. And that is just 7 weeks. That is the leading edge of this. That is before the harvests that depend on nitrogen have started to come in. This is before the very long tail of the food crisis. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is warning that global fertilizer prices will average 15 to 20% higher through the first half of 2026. In Europe, nitrogen fertilizer prices are already up 20%. In the UK, the Food and Drink Federation is now projecting that food inflation could hit 10% by the end of the year. That forecast was 3.2% before the war started. Remember, every single talking head at the Federal Reserve who told you inflation expectations were well anchored. Keep that phrase in the back of your pocket. We're going to come back to it. If you live in the United States, you will pay for this war at the grocery store. Eggs are going to cost more. Bread is going to cost more. Your kid's school lunch is going to be strained. The program is going to be strained to the point of cracking. That is very real, but that is not what this segment is about. Because if you live in Sudan, you may not eat at all. UN Trade and Development data. 54% of Sudan's seaborne fertilizer imports came from the Gulf in 2024, the highest share in the world. Sri Lanka, still digging out from a balance of payments collapse, 36%. Tanzania, 31%. Somalia, 30%. Kenya and Mozambique are deeply exposed. These are not countries with a fiscal shock absorber. These are not countries with central banking tools or currency reserves or political credit with other global leaders. These are countries where we're already having massive drought. Somalia is facing a drought on the scale of 2022, 2017, and 2011. These are countries where Sudan is already in famine. The conditions, 19 million people currently facing acute food insecurity. 1 in 3 Sudanese has been displaced. The UNHCR calls this the world's worst humanitarian crisis. So now add fertilizer cost shock or lack of availability. Add a supply chain rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope because the strait is on fire. Add 3 weeks to every journey. Add the insurance, the bunker fuel. Add interest payments. 3.4 billion people in the global south now live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on health or education. Into that reality, we drop a fertilizer shock, an energy shock, a freight shock, and a war shock all at once. That is how you get 45 million people in acute hunger. That's how you get a famine at the tip of a cruise missile. The Financial Times uses it. Foreseeable. They use this term, foreseeable. A thing is foreseeable when when a reasonable person in a position of responsibility could have anticipated. When the General Counsel at the Pentagon and the analysts at Treasury and the modeling teams at USDA and the country desks at state could have told the President or the Secretary of Defense or the NSC that starting a war in the Persian Gulf would break the global fertilizer trade in Africa and South Asia, foreseeable means that they knew, or they should have known, or they chose not to know. Pick one. Pick any one of those things. Legally, morally, politically, all three get you to the same place. Responsibility. Responsibility for people dying because they can't eat. Nobody in the West Wing will be asked about this by any major news network. Nobody on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is going to have a hearing about this. Of course, we already gutted USAID. The administration froze humanitarian budgets. And we've made a choice. That is America first. That is Project 2025. Walk away. Let them starve. It's somebody else's problem. I'm an America First leftist. I will tell you what America First actually looks like because I believe in appropriating terminology. It's one of the most effective ways to counter this. It looks like not starting wars. It looks like not offshoring our food security. It looks like not selling out the poor in Gombe or Mogadishu so that a defense contractor can book another quarter of record earnings and a Silicon Valley donor can get a fresh check from the Treasury. By the way, this weapons systems that we have proving incredibly ineffective. Millions of dollars of missiles to go up against a $50,000 drone. The hunger that follows this war is a choice, and it was made by a human being. And we're going to keep naming them. This war did not end when the bomb stops, and it will not end when the strait opens. By the way, today as I'm recording this, it's constantly back and forth. Is the strait open? Is the strait closed? This is abject chaos for no purpose other than apparently market manipulation. And the damage moves downstream from this. 45 million people, 2/3 of Africa, 19 million Sudanese already in acute food insecurity. We only look at this through the oil lens, through the lens of the cost of gasoline. We don't think about the bellies of children who will starve because of the choices that we have made. But we are going to reckon with that every day for as long as it takes. It's April 19th, 2026. You live in a country where you have the luxury for now, of going to the store and seeing abundant food that is still within, hopefully, the grasp of affordability. Recognizing, of course, that millions of Americans themselves are in deep food insecurity. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you don't have the deep trauma, the deep, horrible violence of not being able to find food or to be able to afford food tonight. I hope that for you. I wish that for you, but that is not the case for millions of Americans, for billions of people around the planet. And I have to think that we can do better. This is the Ignition News. Stay lit.